Alright, well hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. So my name is Tommy Martin and this is my beautiful wife, Phoebe Martin, and we're both fourth year medical students. And so today on this video we have a super special guest, Miss Casey, who runs a great YouTube channel that is super influential towards Caribbean medical students and really medical students in general. And so what we want to do today is just interview her about some questions about being a Caribbean medical student and get to know her a little bit and encourage you guys if you are doing the Caribbean route as all three of us did. But before we get to the interview, I want you to know that you are greatly loved, and that you are wonderfully and beautifully created, and that you are capable of far more than you could ever imagine. Alright, so let's get right into it. So as we get going, Miss Casey, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you attend medical school, what year you're in, and what your future plans are? Just tell us a little bit about everything about you.
Okay. Alright, so as you guys know, my name is Casey. I am a third year medical student. I am also a Caribbean med student, and I recently moved to Chicago to finish out the rest of my clinicals, and so I will be doing those for the next 2 years here in this amazing city, which has been great so far. I've been here since October, and I did my undergraduate degree in communication studies, so I decided to go the Caribbean route because I just had an arts background, and at the time I didn't really have all the prerequisites and all the things necessary to have a competitive application really for Canadian or American school, and I am Canadian. So I did my undergraduate degree in Ottawa, Ontario at Carleton University, and I decided in about my third year of undergrad that I wanted to completely change career paths and do medicine, and I was very interested in psychiatry, mental health at the time, and so that's kind of how I ended up on the trajectory that I'm on right now. And yeah, I guess that's a little quick summary of what I'm all about. So
that's incredible. How are you doing without Tim Hortons?
Oh, you know what? I actually don't drink coffee, so I'm okay.
Oh.
But I do miss the donuts. But like, we have Krispy Kreme, so
amen. Preach.
I can't complain. I like Tim Hortons. I feel like it's a Canadian thing, but I'm not that upset about not having it. Does that make me a bad Canadian? I don't know. I'm sorry to my viewers who are watching, judging me. I'm not a true Canadian.
That's too funny. Awesome.
So our next question, because people have heard why we chose to go to an international medical school, so we want to know what was your final decision of why you decided to go to an international medical school?
Right. So I decided to go the international route because like I mentioned before, I didn't really know a lot about what my options were. And I've talked about this in videos before where I do regret not doing more research, but at the time it really was that back then I thought that in order to go to medical school, you had to have an undergraduate degree in the sciences. I didn't know that you could do pre-med and be majoring in something else. I didn't know that you could, just do the bare bones prereqs and have a great application, but be majoring in something that wasn't science related and still take the MCAT. I didn't know any of that. And so when I decided to change career paths, I just thought it was too late for me to do school in Canada or the United States. So I had found out, my mom actually sent me a link to this Caribbean med school, and she said, look, you can go to this school and you won't have to spend the next 2 years doing all the prereqs that you'll need to do to apply in Canada. And I really just assumed that was my only option, and I just kind of rolled with it, and it ended up working out for the best. Clearly I'm here, and I'm almost done now, which is crazy. But yeah, it was the fact that they were giving me a chance, and I didn't think that I'd have a chance anywhere else, given my background.
That's incredible. I'm glad that you went for it, and Phoebe and I, we do not regret it, one day out of our lives, because we've matched, we're here, and so I'm glad that you went for it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go on to the next question. So, would you say that there are any misconceptions about being an IMG or going to an international medical school? And if so, are those misconceptions somewhat true or any true at all?
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of misconceptions. To start off, I think one of them is the misconception that all Caribbean students or all international students are lazy or that they don't know how to study, they don't know what hard work is. And I think that's just so, couldn't be farther from the truth. You know, some of the people who end up at these schools have worked so hard to get where they are and are actually just massively overcompensating because we know that we have to compete against American trained students if we want to get back to the United States. And so I think that's a real shame, and I think that stigma, like we mentioned in the first half of this interview when I was talking to you guys, I think that stigma is kind of going away as people are realizing that it's becoming so common to attend international schools. But then on the other hand, you know, like any situation, there are going to be the people who are lazy, and there are going to be people who aren't hardworking and who don't really know that this is what they want to do, and they apply it on a whim, especially for the schools who maybe aren't as strict as others, you know, with their application process. And so that does lead to more people kind of flowing in who may not really take it seriously. And so I think that's sometimes where the bad reputation may come from, is because, like with anything else, there are just going to be people who don't really love what they're doing, and that shows.
For sure. So
and then wait.
Yeah,
go for it. I have one other thing. I think there's a common misconception that if you go to an international school, specifically a Caribbean medical school, that you can't match to residency. And I think you guys are a perfect example that that's so not true.
Well,
people are really worried about that. I was when I first started, so.
Right,
Yeah.
and we honestly get that all the time, and I know that you said you've received tons of messages about it. I'm still getting messages, especially since we've matched. I'd say I've been getting more messages like, oh my goodness, how did you match? Like, you're an IMG, like, we thought that was impossible, you know, and so I definitely think that is a huge misconception, and even, like, getting interviews, you know, like, everyone thinks, like, oh my goodness, like, I'm not going to get enough interviews, I'm from an IMG, and I'm not bragging on Phoebe and I whatsoever, but we were able to get more than enough interviews. We went on 16 interviews together, all at the same hospitals, and we're both IMGs. And so just for all the IMGs that's watching, like, please, you know, take pride in where you went to school and be confident that you do deserve these interviews and that you are good enough to get these interviews and you are good enough to get a residency. So let's crush that misconception and let us all go and get residencies and continue to crush that misconception.
For sure.
Definitely.
Okay.
And just to clear up a misconception we probably should have talked about before, I had heard the buzz when I was going to go to an international school was that there's a misconception that if you go to a Caribbean school, you have to take another test before coming into the States to practice, and that is not true at all. So U.S. medical students take step 1, 2, and 3, and their boards to be board-certified physicians after completing a residency, and that's the same process for IMGs. We take step 1, the same exact step 1, step 2, same step 2, same step 3, and board certification. So there's no extra test that we have to take.
And to add on to that, I know that you guys, I think for your school, you guys probably both took the MCAT, yeah?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't take the MCAT, and so that's just because the school that I applied to didn't require the MCAT, and I was worried about that at the beginning because I had heard some buzz, like Phoebe said, that, you know, if you don't take the MCAT, you're not allowed to sit the USMLE exams, which is obviously, again, not the case because if you think about it, the majority of the medical student population in the world doesn't have to take the MCAT. It's a US and Canadian-based exam to get into those schools, and so not having the MCAT, you know, while that having those skills will prepare you somewhat for the curriculum that you'll be learning in medical school, it's not going to prevent you or aid in your ability to sit the board exams as a medical student. Because once you get into med school, you're in, and the MCAT becomes kind of somewhat irrelevant, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, my score would definitely show how irrelevant that exam is.
Definitely.
Oh.
So what advice would you give to students considering Caribbean schools?
Or non-U.S. medical schools in general.
Okay, yeah, international schools all throughout. I would say do your research. I'm the prime example of someone who didn't do very much research because I really just thought that there was no shot for me coming from an arts background. I didn't have any friends who were in the medical field who could kind of lend me their perspective and tell me what my options were. So I would say make sure you find other YouTube channels, find blogs. There's so much out there now compared to when we applied to medical school. I feel like I didn't know anything about the Caribbean or international medical school system at all. So now that there's so much information, I'd say just utilize it and search as hard as you can and find out, find out if the schools you're looking into are accredited, number one, through ECFMG. Make sure they're also accredited in the state you want to practice in, because not all of the Caribbean med schools specifically are accredited in all 50 states. So that's important to know. And then you also want to know if the school is going to qualify you to get federal loans if you're an American going to a Caribbean school, at least, because not all of those schools will qualify you to get those loans, and you need to pay for med school. And so these are all just little things that can go overlooked and can really put you in a bad spot once you've already started, because you don't want to get halfway through and then realize that you're going to have to transfer out, or you're not going to be able to practice where you want to practice, and so on and so forth. So research. That's my biggest piece of advice. And then just work hard. You got in, that's amazing, but there's still a long way to go, and we're competing not against other IMGs, but we're competing against the American-trained students, and even if we have great applications, we are at a disadvantage because not all programs will accept IMG applicants, or not all specialties, or, like we talked about before, some specialties are just really competitive and do really care about where you went to school and what your training was like. So work hard and do well on the step one.
Definitely.
Not the only thing, but it is important.
Right. Okay, so the next question, what would you say has been your biggest struggle going to a Caribbean medical school? And then also, what is the biggest reward going to a Caribbean medical school?
The biggest struggle... I think the biggest struggle for me was not being prepared, because I was able to get in, like I said, with the minimal prerequisites that I had. I didn't take the MCAT. I did take some prerequisite anatomy, physiology courses and a neuroscience course, but there was a lot of scientific information at a baseline that I lacked. So the learning curve was huge for me coming from an arts program. Mm-hmm. So for me, those first couple of semesters were extremely difficult because I didn't have the work ethic, because I had been coming from a program that required, writing skills and just being able to sit down and put out all my ideas on paper. And there was a lot of information just about basic cell structure and biochemistry, just simple principles that you should really go into medical school kind of having some information and some knowledge about, even if it's just having seen it once or twice or a couple of years ago. Not everyone's going to remember everything about their molecular bio course when they start medical school. No. At all. But there were just some things, basic things. The structure of the cell, I was going off of bio from high school, so it had been a long time. Mm-hmm. And so for me, the hardest thing was catching up, I think, to where some of the other students were who had majored in bio, and then making up for that time when I was studying for step one, because I did spend a lot of time during those first couple semesters just trying to catch up with my basic bio and biochem information, as opposed to really just focusing on what we were learning that day or that week, so that I could retain that information for step one.
Nice.
Yeah, so that was the hardest thing.
So despite these struggles and the rewards, would you follow this same route all over again?
Yeah. Oh, I guess I didn't say what the rewards were, so I'll answer both those in one.
I take your struggles as rewards. I know that's where you're going with that.
No, No, it's true. The struggle is rewarding because
Right?
every time that I would, pass my shelf exams, I proved to myself that I could do it. I had so much self-doubt at the beginning because I knew that I was coming from a background that no one else in my class was coming from.
Right.
And so every time, every month, those 6 exams at the end of every shelf or at the end of every block, I proved to myself that I could do something that I never thought I'd be able to do. So that was a huge reward. And then passing step 1 and making it this far has just been so rewarding. Even on the days where, school is tough and I'm not loving it, it feels great to be where I am right now. And so if I had to do it all over again, yeah, I'd do it all over again. Sometimes people ask me would I have spent those extra 2 years and tried to get into a North American school. And I don't think I would if I had to do it all over again because, I'm happy with how quickly I was able to jump in. Sure, it was a lot harder, playing catch up like I just mentioned, but ultimately it led me to be where I am right now. I'm still very young, and I will be quite young when I finish medical school, and I'm really happy with that. The only thing I would have changed is, again, like I mentioned, just doing more research and seeing what my other options were.
For sure.
Awesome. Well, I think we just have one last question. And so, Miss Casey, what would be some last advice or encouragement that you'd like to give future medical students or even current medical students right now, just in general?
I would say that if you are a current medical student, if you're in your first 2 years, it gets better. It's so hard those first 2 years, really, but life gets so much better after step 1, honestly. And so if you can just put those 2 years of hard work in, it's not to say that it's not going to be hard in your last 2 years, but those first 4 semesters are so critical, but they're so trying. And if you can just stick with it and study hard and, there's a lot more to your application than step 1 scores, but during the first 2 years, I think that should be your primary focus. Study really hard so that you can get to the point where you're taking step 1 and you don't feel like it's this huge unachievable goal. If you're working in increments throughout the process, then that'll make it a lot easier for you. And then for anyone who's thinking of going the Caribbean route or the international route, I would say that, go for it. If it's what you want to do, if you feel like medicine is calling to you, then you just have to listen to that inner voice. That's what I had. I really felt like I had this strong feeling like I should pursue this career in medicine. And there were no other signs pointing towards that for me other than that strong kind of intuition that I had. And who knows where it'll lead, but so far I'm pretty happy with it. And I think on the ECFMG website, it says 25% of the MD population in the United States are IMGs. So there are a lot of us. That's no small number. And so it's not so uncommon as one person might think. So that's what I would say.
Right.
Awesome.
Wow. That's absolutely incredible. And Casey, thank you so much for sharing all this great information with all my subscribers. And to all my subscribers, I just ask that you please go check out her channel. She is so inspirational and talks all about the Caribbean life as a medical student. And she's making it through the journey as well. She's a third-year student now, about to be a fourth-year student, and she's going to match as well. So make sure you follow her journey and comment on her stuff. Show her love and support because for all of us, this journey is hard. So any little bit of encouragement that you give us, it helps so much. And so make sure you go to her channel and check it out. And outside of that, Phoebe, do you have anything to add?
No, I just think that this is so great, and I just encourage all of you to continue to help out your classmates, students from everywhere. You never know who you're going to come in contact with. A student that you may work with in lab, or a student that you may rotate with in the hospital, maybe your co-intern one day, and that's really exciting, or your colleague, in the far future. So just really try to make as many connections as you can, never burn bridges, and just stay true to yourself during medical school.
Amen. All right, well, to end the video, I just want all of you to know that you are greatly, greatly loved, and that you are wonderfully and beautifully created, and that you are capable
of far more than you could ever imagine.